When I was about 7 or 8, I so wanted to be a truck driver, swiftly followed by a ballet dancer. And by the time I got to the age of 14, I'd set my sights on being a PE teacher, and that's exactly what happened. I'm Antoinette, and I go live every Sunday. And this year I'll be focusing on life lessons for little A, little me. Things I would have told my bold 20-year-old self to know, things I would have liked her to know as I approach 50. Here's the thing, I could only dream about what I knew, what I'd experienced at the time. My horizons, aged 14, really only stretched as far as teaching. My oldest foster sister had just started uni, and I didn't really know, or I wasn't conscious of anyone else that had been to university. I'd never even travelled abroad. So don't get me wrong, teaching was a wonderful profession. And through it, I got to see parts of the world that, well, I could only dream of. And it's through teaching that I ended up teaching in Kenya for 2 years. So every Friday, there's this, the grumpy corner where we all just hopefully read through something called the TES, the Teaching Education Supplement. And at the back of it is where all the jobs are. And over time, I begun to realise, oh, there's jobs abroad for teachers, for people like me. And I began to think, or like a little seed of something was sown in me. So along with that, and then a catalyst moment in my life, I learned a really big lesson. I learned something that I had probably intrinsically understood as a little child, hustling and surviving through the care system, but until this point had not systematically deployed. So by my mid-20s, I needed to step away from my life. And that, again, I've got loads of things I'm thinking, that's a story for another day. It is, we'll get to it. But I was also realising that as a black, British-born woman with an African, or Nigerian and Dominican heritage, who had been disconnected from her birth family through the care system and was now being raised by a Jamaican family, that I really didn't fit in anywhere. Was it conscious? Again, it was probably a discomfort. And that's actually been a long journey even into that. So at that point, 23-year-old me, I think she was, bought a map of Africa and I stuck it on the wall next to my bed. It was huge. It was like 1.5 by 1.5 meters squared. And every morning I would wake up and I would say, next year I am going to be in Africa. But this didn't happen overnight. So, first of all, every Friday when the tests came out, I would make a note of any school in Africa that was advertising. After around 6 months of doing this, I'd created a database of around 50 schools. Like this, people, was what happened before the internet. It was a long and slow and painful process. And then in the summer term of that first year, I systematically wrote to every single school on my list. I sent a CV and I sent a cover letter and I sent it off with a wish and a prayer, like, goodness me, for a real trust in the postal system. It's a glorious thing, right? One country to another, in the middle of nowhere, some of these schools, and still many of them arrived. And with each letter that I posted, I would stick a coloured dot on my map to represent each school. And this took time as well because, I don't even think I had a printer at the time, so I'd have to be doing like 1 or 2 at a time at school. I'd have to personalise each letter and try and research whatever crumbs I could find about that school. And as I said, every single day I would look at that map and as the dots grew, I would just focus in and I would say, I'm coming for you. I am going to live in this continent somewhere. Well, spoiler alert, you know that that's exactly what happened. I ended up in Kenya teaching for 2 years and I ended up with the very first school that got back to me. I was just so keen. I'm like, yes, I'll take it. But the wonderful thing was that as their interview process was going through, around 10 other interviews came through and they were from schools that I'd canvassed during those few months. And I really think this was a watershed moment in my life. You see, it's really easy to dream, isn't it? Actually, let me be a bit more forceful than that. It's really important to dream. But when you've got my personality makeup, a dreamscape can sometimes be limited by what I know or what I've read about or what I've experienced. I'm not one of those big creative beings that can see something and then just go off into a flight of fancy. And that actually sounds really negative. That's a really wonderful thing to be able to do. I don't have that. But it's why I say dream as big as you can, then double down and dream bigger. And as I've gone through life, I'm really fortunate. I've got wonderful friends with big existential minds, and I'll often get alongside them and amplify whatever is going on in my mind. But dreaming isn't enough. You need a plan of action. So just like I did with the map, then the letters, you need to be able to break down your dream as best as you can into small digestible chunks. It's that old adage, isn't it? How do you eat an elephant? One chunk at a time. And you might need to add patience into that mix too, that's okay. Sometimes we've got life lessons that we need to learn along the way before we can step into our dreams. And finally, you need to get activated and take steps and get doing. It's one of the reasons why I created Entreplaneurs with Lynsey. And if you're stuck at any of these phases with something that's in your mind, do get in touch. I'll put my website details below too. I think it's also interesting how when you get into this mindset, when you get into this flow, resources can often align around you when you're ready, when your mindset is focused. Some people call it manifestation. I call it God. So here's what I would say to little a at this stage in my life. So little a, meet more people. Diversity is key. Stretch your horizons. Do things out of your comfort zone, because if you can imagine it, there's every chance you can do it. Dream, plan, do. You will be unstoppable. To end on a challenging note, Oprah Winfrey says, if it's not hard, you're not dreaming big enough. What do you think about that? If you've enjoyed this or any of the other talks or anything from Sunday Soul Search last year, and you know someone that needs a speaker or a podcast guest or even a host, do connect us. I'd love that. But to finish up, you're powerful, little A. You're powerful, little A. Be brave, be bold, be kind. Choose joy. See you next Sunday.